Chapter 1 Malviya Nagar, where it all began. Ladka to refugee hai. I couldn't believe my ears. After all, I, a Delhi-born boy, to Delhi-born parents, was being referred to as a refugee, formally, for the first time in my adult life. That too by none other than my would-be in-laws. This was in 2003, a full 56 years after my grandparents had landed in Delhi from Multan district in Pakistan after partition. No marks for guessing that it was meant not as a statement of fact, but as a reminder of Auqat for a service-class Punjabi who had won the heart of their most beloved Banyan Jain daughter, who came from a business family. It's another matter that this rather persistent refugee went on to attend the most premier educational institutes, landed a plum job, and eventually won the family's heart and their daughter's hand. The original refugees in question, namely my paternal grandparents, were allotted a 200 gaz plot in Malviya Nagar, a refugee colony, when they landed in Delhi with their siblings and children in tow. It was on this plot that 6 independent floors of 100 gaz each were built. Out of these, house number 19 by 20, popularly known as 90-20, was to later become my home address for the longest time. As a child, I remember pestering my grandmother to tell me stories of their lives back in Multan. I loved to see the twinkle in her eye as she reminisced about the past and spoke at length about their fields or khed as she referred to them. The one story that she would always tell me was about how if the entire khed had to be covered on foot, one would need to leave early in the morning, and even then one would be only back the next day. In turn, I would egg her on with, हाँ अब तो फसल बोते हुए जाते थे और काटते हुए आते थे. Of course, you would sow the seeds on your way up and harvest the produce on your way back. Growing up, the story stayed with me as a great reminder of the fact that even when the 200 gaz house replaced the large expanse of their fields, it did little to dampen their spirits. In fact, they never recounted the horror of partition, just fond memories of the past life. The tale of the Pandavas, any account of the life of my grandparents, wouldn't be complete without this rather curious story. Legend has it that a Peer Baba read my grandmother's face and made a prophecy. तुम्हारे यहाँ 5 पांडव पैदा होंगे. You'll be blessed with 5 sons, he had said. With the birth of a first son, the prophecy seemed to be coming true. So my uncle was named Yudhishthir, after the eldest of the Pandavas. Only their next child happened to be a girl, leading everyone to dismiss Peer Baba's prophecy as hogwash. But they were proved wrong, as my grandparents did go on to have 5 sons and 2 daughters. And no, the other sons weren't named after the rest of the Pandavas. So we didn't have the star cast of Mahabharata at home. Even though in the hierarchy of the 5 sons, my dad was at a distant number 4, my grandparents lived with us, while my dad's 4 brothers and their families stayed on different independent floors. Back then, much as I loved my grandparents, I must admit that there were days when I thought my cousins had it much better. After all, they didn't have to play the default host for every function simply because the eldest Grovers, namely my grandparents, lived there, where our house was like a mela with a sea of relatives thronging it. Their houses offered much more privacy. In hindsight, this appears to be such juvenile thinking, especially as I realize the kind of blessings I have received. In fact, I feel a lot of that karma came through, as among our extended family, I ended up studying the most, and as it turned out, achieving the most in my career. The only time my grandparents moved away briefly to live in another unit in the 200 gaz plot was when I was in high school, and they thought I could do with some more space. But the act resulted in so much emotional pain to us as a family that my dad decided to buy a 200 square yard builder floor right opposite where we live. Well, the house cost us a whopping rupees 32 lakh in 2002, a huge amount in those days. The sense of fulfillment of living with my grandparents under the same roof once again was priceless. While the house cost us a whopping rupees 32 lakh in 2002, a huge amount in those days, the sense of fulfillment of living with my grandparents under the same roof once again was priceless. My grandfather, Shri Nandlal Grover, was an extremely well-respected figure in the community, especially as he set up the Arya Samaj of Malviya Nagar, as well as the accompanying primary school. Ours was a liberal family growing up. I didn't see my grandparents or parents take to any elaborate religious rituals or idol worship. We never went to the mandir except on Janmashtami to see the jhakis. Instead, what we had, and these were part of my early years, were frequent havans in the Arya Samaj tradition that were meant as acts of purification and acknowledging nature as a real god. I grew up an atheist mostly. Curiously, when I went on to set up Bharat Pay, its leased office had its boundary wall touching the same Arya Samaj, something that I recognized as less of a coincidence and more of a blessing even at that time. I ensured that the inauguration of this office and of every subsequent Bharat Pay office was marked by a havan, something that was absolutely ingrained within me. When Bharat Pay turned into a unicorn, and for the longest time it was the only unicorn with a Delhi pin code, I knew it was due to the blessings of my grandparents. The board that said Grover, Lala and Mehta outside the chartered accountancy firm that my dad ran was another familiar sign for me growing up. Many years later, even when he had bought the firm, he continued to run it with the names of his original partners in recognition of their connection. I had an early association with my dad's firm, not as a bookkeeper, but as a water soaker. Come monsoon and his basement office in Malviya Nagar would be flooded. Some of us kids would be then called upon to draw out the water with pumps. The sense of importance that we would feel on being entrusted with such a critical job and the fun that we had in the process were both incomparable. By the time I was in 5th grade, my mom had joined a school as a teacher. If there was one thing that she wanted to give her children, it was good education and a lot of exposure. Her dad, my Nana ji, was a banker and worked at the erstwhile Imperial Bank, which was rechristened the State Bank of India, after the Government of India and the RBI assumed its joint ownership in 1955. While he had been posted all over the country, he retired as a GM, loan dispersals, from SBI's Mumbai office, and one that I frequented as a child. It was fascinating to see his imposing office at Nariman Point, the tall SBI building with the amazing view of the sea in the background, and the imposing Mumbai skyline had me in awe of a banker's life. Amin Chand Pyare Lal Jalandhar Wale. That was the origin of the name of my school, although the name had been shortened to the more fancy-sounding APJ. While it may have lost some ground today to the many international schools that have since made their appearance, it was considered to be a decent school in those days, and I have extremely fond memories of that time. The school was located in Sheikh Sarai in Delhi. One day my grandfather went and spoke to the principal, one Mr. Chaudhary, and I got enrolled in the school. Each day it was a ritual for my grandfather to walk me to school through the neighboring Khidki Gaon and for us to make a pit stop in the fields to pluck mooli and munch on it on the way to school. Interestingly, the kids in my school fell into 4 groups based on their standing in life. There was a Bong group, largely comprising residents of CR Park, the capital's Bengali hub. Then there were the rich kids from Tony Greater Kailash, or what it's fashionably called the GK. The cool kids from the Sheikh Sarai, self-financing scheme flats, which were akin to the original condos, followed by the lesser kids from the adjoining Malviya Nagar, such as yours truly. If there was one person who could be credited with briefly uniting these groups, it had to be, surprise of all surprises, the Bollywood actress Tiska Chopra.